Where do you think the greatest opportunities are for prosperity?
The greatest opportunity for prosperity is not to master a specific trade. It's to embrace the mindset of a tradesman. Forgive me if it's a mildly crude, but the great lesson is just because you love something doesn't mean you can't suck at it.
I wanted to dunk a basketball more than anything in the world when I was about 12 or 14.
We better lower those hoops. Let's lower those hoops, Ken.
It's not going to happen.
Little Kenny's not feeling good about himself today. The hoops are too high.
Okay, I want to talk about our men and women in the military. I don't think America's parents or America's young people understand how great of a training ground and opportunity the military is.
What does the military do to make sure that a new conscript is prepared to be shot at and shoot back? That's called boot camp.
Right.
What do we do for these people when we send them back to civilian life? 0.0.
Hey folks, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Mike Rowe. Now, Mike's got a lot of opinions on a lot of different things, and I asked him some things that are right square in the middle of today's working economy. What are the most lucrative trades in America today? What are the great traits of people who win as entrepreneurs? That and so much more is coming to you right now. All right, Mike, I read some data recently that really fascinates me. I talk a lot about it on the show, but I've never asked you to weigh in on it, and it's that 70% of Americans say that they want to be self-employed, but only 6% are. Massive gap in the data. Now, I have a lot of opinions on that, but I've never asked you to weigh in on that. What do you think? What are the multiple things, or is there one key driver? Because you've been out and about, and we've seen you publicly talk to people who work for themselves. Why do you think there's a big gap?
Wow. Yeah, I think, well, I think in part it's because it's very easy to say you want to do something.
Yeah.
I want to fly.
That's right.
According to the data, it's not going to work out for me. You know, but I really want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the data.
Yeah.
Right. You know, figures don't lie.
Yeah.
Liars figure. So there are a lot of ways to think about that, I think, but the way I would come at it is there's this thing, amorphous as it is, called the American dream, and we can define it in any way we want, but a lot of definitions have some things in common, owning a home, certainly, and a surprising number, at least from what I've seen, the possibility of running your own business.
That's it, yeah.
It's not the reality of running your own business. Yeah. It's this idea, you know, that if I do this, this, and that, then I can shed from my life all of the weight and all of the hassle and all of the things that come with working for the man, whatever that means. Yeah. Now, this is all wildly oversimplified, of course, but most tropes are oversimplified, but most tropes are also rooted in some truth. So I think it's a really powerful platitude that a lot of people feel. It's part of this idea that if I could just step out, right, and be free of all of the stuff over here, then good things would start to happen. Well, you know, it's hard to know how to think about it. On the one hand, I think it's good to have dreams, and I think it's useful to be able to contemplate alternative realities, but it's hard.
It's really difficult.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think fine line, right, between encouraging a person to explore and to ponder everything that's possible and enabling them by overly encouraging it. Yeah. We should start with, you know why it's 6%? Because it's hard.
Yeah, right. And I think you've nailed it. People want freedom. And I think they think that if I work for myself, but having worked for myself for a season. In fact, as I was trying to make it in broadcasting, which you know how hard that is, and I'm in my early 30s, I've got 3 kids, I had to work for myself to give myself the freedom to go do the auditions, to try the things, to throw the stuff against the wall. So I was day jobbing it for myself. I was the worst boss I've ever had. And I've never felt more shackled.
Yeah.
Because while I could determine my own schedule, I had to deliver the bacon. It was on me. And I think what people want, Mike, is the freedom piece. And then they realize this is really difficult.
Man, there's always a cost, and then there's always a hidden cost, sunk cost, buried cost, you know. And these things get pretty ephemeral because it's not an inherent weight. It feels heavier to this one than it does to that one. I freelanced from 19 until 42.
Wow.
I freelanced, and one of the tropes that I always, to this day, I still laugh about with my buddies who were doing the same thing at the same basic time, was the feeling you get when you go from March to April. You turn the page on your calendar and you're staring at 30 blank squares.
Yeah. Woo. Yeah.
And it really, for me, it never really went away until a day came. I was probably in my late 30s by this point. I've been freelancing for well over 10 years. And I went back into my old calendars. And I started looking back at, the date books and things. Those squares were all filled up.
Yeah.
The squares were filled.
Yeah.
I just had to reconcile the fact that for a long time they weren't until they were.
Yeah.
So if there's a moral to that story, it's just that you need to be comfortable if you're going to run your own business or even just freelance. If you're going to be an independent contractor, the possibility, the dream, the hope of hanging out your own shingle is almost as important as the reality of being able to do it, at least in terms of being human.
That's right.
And being engaged.
All right, so I want you to weigh in on that. Let's talk about the reality. I have posited many times on my own show, on Fox Business, on Fox News, when they ask me this question and we talk about this data, and I say, I just don't think everybody's cut out to do it. I think anybody can be an entrepreneur, but for how long and how successful? And so it's just as I love sports. Mike, I was done in high school. By the looks of me, this is not shocking news to anybody. I just didn't have what it took to make it as a pro athlete. I think the same is true about entrepreneurs. And so I'm going to take you that direction. I'm curious what you say. You've been out and again, you documented it. We've seen you with entrepreneurs. You called them dirty jobs. We love the concept. But at the end of the day, these were entrepreneurs.
These
were people, many, not all, but they were solving a problem. Or they were working for someone who started a company to solve a problem. I'm curious, are there some non-negotiable characteristics, and I use that term loosely, to being a successful entrepreneur? In other words, if you don't have these, you better go get them. Or if it's a type of thing that you got to have it, and if you don't, it's kind of like leaping ability.
Yeah.
I'm curious, your take on the non-negotiable characteristics to actually be a successful entrepreneur.
So, with one caveat, I've got some ideas, but I think there might be a difference between successful and happy.
Okay, that's fair. I agree with that.
Right? There are lots and lots of books. Well, to be fair, there are lots of books on how to be successful, and there are lots of books on how to be happy. And they do share a fair amount of space on the Venn diagrams, I think, but they don't overlap perfectly. If they did, then every entrepreneur who was financially solvent and robust would be happy.
I agree.
But they're not.
Speaking of which, the audience knows.
There you go.
This is about being good at it and enjoying it. And you got to figure that part out.
So that's really where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
And we see it in my industry. We see it in some shows that have done really, really well over the last couple of decades. We see it in Shark Tank.
Yeah.
You get to sit home and you get to watch an entrepreneur, a dreamer with an idea. You get to watch that idea get greenlit, or you get to watch it done right in the neck.
Yeah.
American Idol.
Yeah.
Same
deal.
Thing. Yeah. It's a great lesson in life, and I think I said this to you before once in front of a large group of people. And forgive me if it's a mildly crude, but the great lesson is just because you love something doesn't mean you can't suck at it.
That's exactly right.
And that's not a thing that we're raised to understand.
That's right.
We're raised, in fact, to understand the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Follow that dream.
Yeah.
First thing, identify that dream.
Oh, yeah.
What do you want to be? What do you want to do?
Right.
Now, most kids, most teenagers, most grown-ups, they know they're supposed to have an answer.
Right.
But they haven't really truly thought about it.
No.
And so they'll default back to your first question. I want to find my soulmate, want to nail my dream job, right? Want to live happily ever after, maybe run my own business.
Right.
Those are big things, right?
Yeah.
Those are big things. As opposed to taking some sort of skills-based inventory.
Right.
What am I good at?
Yeah.
Right? Where do those opportunities exist? Am I going to have to move?
Right. To your point, I got to jump in here because this starts when you're younger. Good-meaning, well-meaning adults say things like, you can do whatever you want, Mikey.
Sure.
You can do whatever you want. And you want to say, no, you can't. Because I wanted to dunk a basketball more than anything in the world when I was about 12 or 14.
We better lower those hoops. Let's lower those hoops, Ken.
It's not going to happen.
Little Kenny's not feeling good about himself today. The hoops are too high.
Yeah, but
and that's
wait a
not
second.
fair.
You told me I can do whatever I want. There's an inherent confusion and then maybe a sense of you're just completely confused at this point because this message this whole time in your life has been you can do whatever you want and I really want to do this. But turns out when I go sing in front of Simon Cowell, he says I can't do it.
That's right. And by the way, you're not singing in front of Simon Cowell. You're singing in front of Simon Cowell and 30 million people.
Right.
So now you learn for the first time in your precious little life that the dream you were told you could achieve if you just believed in it hard enough because, hey, Beyonce said the same thing.
Right.
I saw her. She was on the TV. She won an award, and she said, never, ever give up on your dream.
That's it. Oh, that's another one.
Never give up on your dream. But it goes right to the guts of what you're saying. And I just had this conversation with my mother, who's 86 years old.
Who's a gem, by the way. And I got to tell you, my wife just bought her book.
Well, God bless your
wife.
wife.
Is absolutely cracking up every night in bed. I'm over here reading my history stuff.
Yeah.
And she's over here chuckling her head off. And the other night I said, well, what are you laughing at? It's your mom's book, by the way.
So my mom
Sorry to interrupt you. You were on a great path.
Look, I love to talk about my mom because she both confirms and debunks the very point I'm trying to make, right? Because this woman wrote every day for 60 years.
Wow.
Every day. From before I was born until she turned 80. She wrote stories about the people she met in the course of her day. Unauthorized biographies. They were funny. They were smart. She was like a self-appointed ombudsman, like an Irma Bombeck, walking around Baltimore with her yellow legal pad.
I love that.
Interviewing a cop on a horse, right? And writing the story. It's my earliest memories. And then, she'd put them on a refrigerator with a magnet, and my dad would bring them down and read them to anybody. Yeah. You're stuck in an elevator, he'd pull out this, have you heard the latest from Peggy Rowe? Blah, blah, blah. Point is, my mom had a dream of becoming a best-selling author, and she had every reason in the world to give up on that dream by the time she was 45, and she did. She gave up on the dream, but she never stopped writing. And then way leads on the way. I had some success, and I was able not to call a publisher. No publisher would take it. I published 10,000 copies myself.
Yeah.
Then the publishers read it in earnest.
Of course.
And they all called to say, you didn't tell us she could write. So my mom just finished her 4th book, right? She'll be a 4-time New York Times bestselling author.
Wow.
And her career starts at a glance at 86. Of course, it really starts 60 years prior. But I'm only saying this to your listeners because the essential question is, what should my mom say when an aspiring writer comes to her who's 25 or 30 and says, do you have any advice for me, Peggy? And they're fully expecting to hear my mom say, don't give up. Don't give up on your dream. See, I did it, right? But she doesn't, She did for a little while, and then we started to really talk about this, and I'm like, Mom, you have to wrestle now with the same thing that I'm sure you wrestle with on your radio show and that anybody who's ever had any level of success has to decide. You have to draw the line between that which is encouraging and that which is enabling.
That's exactly right.
And it's really, really hard to do. In fact, how dare we even try unless you can really look into the heart,
that's right,
into the soul, and into the toolbox.
That's right.
Of the person we're talking to. And even if you can do those things, good luck weighing and measuring ambition.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I agree. I always start with talent. When I'm coaching someone live or on this show, it's, do you have the talent? That's why we created the Get Clear Assessment. We start with talent. I don't care what you want to do. I want to know, can you do it? Because if you can do it, meaning I have the ability, you were joking about, the idea of you being the clay today when you walked in before we started recording.
You be the potter.
I'm the potter. Clay. Well, here's the deal. The way that works is you got to have clay. And clay represents talent.
Yeah.
Now, education, or whatever that looks like, or experience is the potter's hands, the force of the wheel. We get that. But if you don't have any clay, meaning any talent, so back to that question, what do you think, because we had a fun rabbit trail, what do you think are some absolutely mandatory characteristics or talents or whatever to actually win? Because we're talking about the happiness versus successful. Let's just say the success part. Let's assume they found a problem they want to solve.
Great. So, yeah, I'm not going to go with the persistence. I'm not going to go with determination. I'm not going to go with staying the course. That only makes sense if you're heading in the right direction.
That's right.
And I don't know if you are, right? I would say that the non-negotiable virtues that are possessed by every single person I know who is happy / successful, not successful / happy.
Love that distinction.
Okay? Right? Curiosity is number one. Skepticism is a very close number two. And a slightly subversive sense of humor and self-deprecating awareness is maybe number three, maybe even number two. I don't know. Those three are also close.
Yeah.
You must be curious.
Yeah.
You must be skeptical, and you must be willing to take a pie in the face.
Yeah.
You must know that the odds of your success, as measured by most metrics, is skinny.
Yep.
And you must know that if you do get the thing that we're referring to as success, and this is the bitterest pill of all, it isn't actually solely because you possess those three qualities.
Right.
There is something else, and I don't know what to call it. We tend to default to luck, divine providence, happenstance.
Yes.
But
I like that word, and I just got something, and we're friends now, so call this out as massive Velveeta cheese if it feels this way.
All right.
But first of all, that's an old word, happenstance.
Oh, yeah.
And yet I heard it and I went, I like that you were going that direction, because I think if some people, they just stay with it, they just don't stink and quit. And all of a sudden, something happens because they stood. I'm just going with, I stand, I'm going to stand, I'm going to keep showing up, I'm going to keep staying with it.
You showed up.
And then, in other words, if I stay in the right place, Mike, I think the right time eventually happens. Now, the key part of that is the right place.
That's right.
If you're starving because you suck at whatever you're trying to do, no amount of standing is going to bring the right time.
That's right.
Is that fair?
It's totally fair. And what is the kindest thing to do? Another really important virtue, by the way. But what is the kindest thing we can do for our fellow travelers in this quest for satisfaction, happiness, and whatever it is? It is to tell them the truth when they need to hear it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not to tell them the truth when they don't need to hear it. Because if you're in that business, all you are is just a font of truth.
I think that's huge.
It's kind of vomitous. Honestly,
it is.
I mean, look,
it is.
There's no good way to spin vomiting at all. And I suppose if you're vomiting truth, that's better than if you're vomiting lies.
I agree.
But it's best not to vomit.
Yeah, so true. And I would add that virtue right there is great. If you are willing to get feedback and put people around you whose feedback actually matters, you got a shot.
What's the old story with the emperors or the Caesars? There was a person whose main job was to lean in.
Yes.
You are but a man.
Right.
You are but a man.
Very important.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, but no one's getting out of this alive.
Right.
You put your toga on same way we all do.
That's
Just a man.
Your time's coming.
So, balancing certainty and humility, that's another thing that most of the successful people I know have done. They know when to be certain. They know when to dig in. Yeah. But it's not nearly as often as we think.
Yeah. Hey, folks, I want to tell you about Aiden. He started at Bethel Tech 2 weeks after graduating high school, and less than a year later, he's 19 and working as a full-stack software developer. He loved the idea of being able to work at his own pace, but what he really thought was cool is Bethel Tech's faith-based learning environment and being with classmates who had a similar worldview. Now, if this is you, or if you have a son or a daughter that's looking for the next step out of high school and they may be tech-minded, at least interested, you need to talk to Bethel Tech. Listen to this. Fortune Magazine named them as a top 10 best UX UI boot camp for 2024. And right now, they're offering you 10% off because you listen and watch the Ken Coleman Show. They also allow you to pay cash, and I know you'll like that. Go to betheltech.net/Ken Coleman for details. Terms and conditions apply. I'm going to switch gears because I love to get your take on the trades. You and I both are evangelists for them. Is there a trade or two that stick out to you right now? If parents were sitting with you at a diner and they said, Mike, which way would you tell our kids to go? I'm just curious. Where do you think the greatest opportunities are for prosperity?
So the greatest opportunity for prosperity is not to master a specific trade. It's to embrace the mindset of a tradesman.
Okay.
It's going back. I'm not saying you have to be an employee. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that anybody, employee, employer, entrepreneur, can think like a freelancer. You can think like a jobber. You can think like a tradesperson. Most tasks have beginnings and middles and ends. And there's great satisfaction in completing a thing. This is why I prefer short stories to novels, at least from a writing standpoint. I love to finish it. Mm-hmm. I love to hear that sound like a snick when the box closes shut, right? And you don't get that in the middle of a job. You don't get that in the middle of a novel. You only get that at the end of a thing. And so I think your earlier question had to do with, what do dirty jobbers know as a group that the rest of us have forgotten? And that's a big, long, complicated book to answer, but part of it is the wonderful sense of finishing a thing and then starting a new one.
Yeah.
It's great. I love starting and I love finishing. That squishy crap in the middle is tiresome.
Right. It is.
Right?
It is.
But think about your day. You wake up, anything could happen. That day you're about to embark upon could be filled with the happenstances that we discussed, the sliding doors that are totally going to change your deal in any number of ways, good or bad. So you ought to be curious about that.
Yeah.
And so, I think that the attitude of a tradesman is super, super important for people to adapt or at least contemplate. On a more literal answer, welding is the way in. If you learn how to weld and if you enjoy it, you have two basic paths. You can weld for the rest of your life and make $65, $70, $80 an hour being great at it. You can make $300 an hour if you want to do it underwater.
Yes.
You can stay in that lane and you can weld and you will have more work than you can do. Plumbing and electric, also every plumber and every electrician I know now, especially the ones who have sort of wandered into that entrepreneurial, small business adjacent world.
Right.
They work when they want, set their own hours, and they're all making mid-six figures. Every single one, no exceptions, right? So, it's still a ladder, and way will lead on to way, but in the trades, that's more true than in actuarial accounting,
right?
Or in broadcasting, or in medicine, or really virtually any other vertical that I can think of. The welders, for instance, that we've assisted over the years at MicroWorks, I circle back now and I ask them questions like, how's it going? And some of them will say, well, yeah, I'm still welding, and you know what? I'm coaching my son's little league, and I'm a Rotarian, I got a balanced life, blah, blah, blah. And others will say, well, I hired my buddy who's a plumber, and then I got a couple HVAC guys, an electrician. Now we got 3 vans and a mechanical contracting company. And something, it's stressful because I'm running a business now, but it's also super gratifying because I'm still doing the work and I'm still getting to complete tasks. And you know what? I can still look at the end of the day and I can measure what I've done. I can see the progress.
That's exactly right.
I don't want to overstate it, but I don't think people really appreciate how valuable that is. This desk is going to look an awful lot like it does right now, 8 hours from now.
That's right.
Like there are not a lot of visual cues in here to let me know when I'm done, except maybe your engineer will go, wrap it up.
Right.
When you're working into trades, you know how you're doing.
That's exactly right.
And you know when you're done.
Well, and there's also, I don't know if kids and I don't know if parents are doing a good job of this, but there's also such a huge people quotient to this. Like, you're going to see your progress. So for people that are wired in the systems and things, they need that closure.
Sure.
I solved a problem. But the other thing is if you don't think you're going to be valuable, come to my house when my HVAC fails in the mid-July in Tennessee. And my wife is happier to see you with all the dirt and grime on you or whatever it is you think you look like. She's way happier to see you than me because I'm an adult who can't fix anything.
That's dolt, not adult.
That's right.
D-O-L-T.
D-O-L-T. When it comes to fixing anything, she's like, Ken, get out of the way.
Yeah.
Call the guy. You're worthless to me right now. And he is invaluable to her. And I just make that little point to say.
She's strict.
I know. Well, no. I can't fix anything, Mike.
But you know your limitations.
I do.
Somebody was honest with you.
100%.
Or maybe you were honest with yourself.
Oh, I figured it out pretty early on. But I was one of these guys that, not the brightest kid, but I just realized what I liked. I hated math and science because I sucked at it. And I woke up to that and going, this makes my brain hurt. But when I go to drama class, my brain's alive. Everybody thinks I'm funny. My teacher likes me more in drama than my science teacher likes me. There were some cues pretty early on.
Yeah.
And I just was smart enough, or maybe not dumb enough.
Or maybe curious enough. But, I mean, or maybe lucky enough, too. Because, look, that was very fortunate that your brain lit up when you were doing a thing that you enjoyed.
Yeah.
Now, you're saying that, my enjoyment came from the fact that my brain lit up.
Right.
And I don't know, that's chicken and egg to me.
Well, there was more. I enjoyed the attention. At 5 years of age, I'll take you back to kindergarten, Mrs. Murray. I'll never forget it. And I can barely remember anything from being 5. But this I remember. One day in class, how many of you would like to volunteer to potentially be in the high school play, to be a newspaper boy? And I did this and probably did where you push under the armpit to get the extra half an inch. 100%. We've all done it. And for whatever reason, no one else raised their hand. And I went and did it. And I remember the night of a play, I was terrified. I'm 5 years old, and I thought I was going to throw up backstage. I went out, delivered my little line, and everybody laughed, and everybody liked me. And at the age of 5, I felt something in my chest. Now, that's just my story. But it was that early where I went, ooh, I like that feeling. I went from wanting to vomit to don't take me off the stage. Can someone throw me a new line?
By the way, those two things are way more adjacent than people think.
I agree.
Not to bring it back to vomit, but I still get that feeling, and I love it. Yeah. It's the uncertainty. It's
when do you get it at this point? I'm just curious. When do you still get that feeling?
I have it right now.
No,
in fact, I'm going to be very sick, Ken. I'm going to be amazingly ill.
He's
here.
lying. Is it right before you shoot something?
No.
When is it?
No, I don't get.
Because I would see you being very calm in that situation.
I am, but it's. I get more turned in with a small group, actually, of kids.
Really? Asking you questions?
No. I like questions, but every now and then I'll find myself in front of, a few classes of high schoolers or people who have just started trade school.
Oh.
And I'm just super aware at this point in my life that is like my mom. I want very much to be encouraging,
right?
And I want to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's such a challenge.
You feel the weight.
I feel
there's where the vomit comes in. You're going, I gotta help these kids, not entertain them.
I've seen people do things as a result of something I've said or not said. Now, most of the feedback is glorious. I get letters every day from people who say, Dirty Jobs and your foundation and these shows collectively are the reason I went into the trades, and let me tell you about my life now.
Yeah.
I don't hear from people who made that same decision but wound up unhappy. But I believe they're out there.
Yeah.
I know they are.
Sure.
And so I just
That's fascinating. I love it.
It's a privilege to write books and come on shows like this and make movies and put an idea out there. But man, oh man, you have to understand that consequences are so often preceded by the word unintended.
Yeah. And I want to move on to the movie. I want to talk about our military men and women. So I just want to wrap this up for our audience. I mean, what you're hearing from Mike here is a deep desire to do the good work. And that vomit only comes when the stakes are high for us.
You know what? It's a version of the Hippocratic Oath.
Yes, it is.
It's actually medical. Is right?
Yeah.
As much as I would like to do something good, the first duty of care has to be don't screw it up.
That's right.
First, do no harm.
It's a great point.
When it comes to broadcasting.
Yeah, it's true.
Try not to mess anybody up.
It's true. Got a lot of people. Okay, I want to talk about our men and women in the military because this really, I think, ties into the new movie. A couple years ago, I did this fun thing with Charles Payne on Fox Business. It was a full hour called From Military to the Marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're going to reverse engineer this deal, but I get that call a lot on my show from people in the military. They're about ready to get out or they're thinking 2 and 3 years ahead, and there's this legitimate concern, Mike, that they can't offer the marketplace anything because that's all they've ever known is the military. And I almost always have to coach them through, tell me what you did in the military, tell me the skills you've acquired. And I go, so do you think anybody want to hire somebody who can do that? And they always kind of chuckle, and there's this thing. Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm kind of giving you this because I love when you just take off. So there is this on the backside, men and women in the military feel like they aren't valuable, and they're having a hard time ideating on what they can do. But now we've got this crisis on the front end that you're addressing and do address, and that is, I don't think America's parents or America's young people understand how great of a training ground and opportunity the military is. I'm just giving you to take with that, take what you want with that.
All right. Well, I would look at it in reverse. I would say, what do we do? What does the military do to make sure that a new conscript is prepared to be shot at and shoot back?
Right.
And vice versa. That's called boot camp.
Right.
That's called basic training. Yeah. That can range from 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the branch. It's intense. Would it be in the SEALs? It's going to be more intense.
Yes.
Rangers, Special Forces, and so on and so on. We have all kinds of protocols through which people must pass before we put them into this new environment. What do we do for these people when we send them back to civilian life? 0.0.
Yeah.
What we need is a kind of reverse boot camp.
Yes.
Because you can't take a 28-year-old man who has been in the thick of battle 2 weeks ago in a foreign land where he's been soldiering for 4 or 5 years, and then sit him across the desk from a hiring professional.
That's right.
To have a conversation about what he might be able to do for this organization. There's absolutely no understanding of what needs to be recalibrated. Now, that's tricky to say out loud because what some people will hear is, well, yeah, because what are they, damaged? Are they it's not about that.
No.
It's about saying you wouldn't put him into that situation without going through some sort of something.
That's right.
So we have to do a much better job at understanding how we're asking these men and women to transition.
Yes.
It's not super simple. But to your point, the basics are there. There's a giant conversation going on today about soft skills.
Yes.
You know, tuck your shirt in, man. Can you show up on time? Right. Will you stay late? Will you volunteer for the crappy test? Well, guess what? Check. Right. Those skills.
That's right.
Those men and women have that nailed.
They got respect. They understand authority, chain of command. I mean, they're conditioned to understand authority, loyalty, chain of command, all those things.
Right. And look, I hate to paint with too broad a brush. There are exceptions to every single rule. But since you asked, I would just say that every single business has a choice to build a vet-friendly on-ramp into their organization.
I agree.
You have a choice, you know? And that's a choice that I think most people who are in a position of influence and power, and who own their own businesses really ought to think about.
Yeah,
you know,
I agree.
There's nothing wrong with putting your thumb on the scale in that world. But beyond that, I would just ruminate on the whole choice business. Again, you know, do you feel grateful for the people that we're talking about?
Yeah.
Do you feel grateful that 1.5% of the country wears a uniform?
Yeah.
Even less now, right? If you do, then that's really important because, you know, 1.5% of the country also grows all the food we eat.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's always like 1.5%. So whether you're wearing a uniform or whether you're a farmer or, you know, fostering a heightened sense of gratitude, that if I were to amend my earlier answer, what I tell you, curiosity, skepticism, and a sense of humor.
Yes.
Yeah. If there was an umbrella over all of it, it would be gratitude. Because if you're grateful, just as a human being, then it's very difficult to feel bitter or abused or victimized. It's very difficult to feel sorry for yourself if your predominant default mechanism involves some semblance of gratitude. And so we are not fundamentally grateful for our military. We pretend to be, but that's false patriotism, and it only comes out on the 4th of July.
Right.
We pretend sometimes in a virtue-y, signal-y kind of way to be grateful for the people who provide our energy and our food and so forth. But really, you know, if you really dig down, we actually kind of resent them because we can't do that.
Yeah.
And when you start to depend on somebody to do a thing that you can't do, then they become a reflection of your own inabilities.
That's really interesting.
That's the fault in our stars.
That's right.
You know, and that's why we curse the linemen when we've been without electricity for 5 days. What's taking you guys so long?
Right.
What's the matter? Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up.
Right.
Right? It's hard to do that if you can hang on to some semblance of gratitude.
And so if we've lost our gratitude, specifically in the military, that's got to be a trickle-down effect on why we're seeing less young people take this very virtuous path, which, by the way, with the GI Bill, is a bit of a head start.
It's a heck of a head start. But you don't even have to use the military to make that point. How about a cop?
Yeah, same deal.
I mean, every single day, we need law enforcement in our lives to some degree. I mean, I'm older than I've ever been, and I can't think of a time in my life when I can think of a harder time to be a cop than right now.
That's right.
As opposed to, say, a fireman.
Yeah.
Now, there is a severe shortage of volunteer firemen in the country right now, but from a PR standpoint, Yeah. You know, I don't know of anybody who sees a fireman running to put out a fire and doesn't quietly go, man, I'm glad those guys are on the job.
So
I'm glad it's not the same for cops, and it's not the same for our military, and it's not the same for our workforce. So that notion, and by the way, it's not the same for our history.
That's right.
We don't have a shared sense of gratitude, it feels, anymore for the miracle that happened a few hundred years ago that allowed you and I to sit here and navel gaze for an hour about the finer points of success and happiness.
So true.
But look, we forget our shared history at our peril.
And that leads us to the new movie. And you're such a great storyteller. Why something to stand for? And tell us what you believe this movie is going to do, or at least what you would hope it would do.
Nobody wants a lecture. Nobody wants a sermon, unless maybe it's Sunday, and even then.
That's right.
You know, we really don't.
Go gentle on us.
Do not go gentle into that good night.
Right.
Rage against the dying of the light, right? We want to be taken on a trip. We want to be entertained. And if we're entertained, then I think we give the storyteller a certain amount of permission to make a point, maybe connect a dot. I don't know. I just know for Dirty Jobs, that show had a lot of big themes in it, and there were a lot of things about it that were important to me that didn't have anything to do with an exploding toilet or a misadventure in animal husbandry. But all those things had to happen because first and foremost, it was an entertainment proposition. So too is this movie. It's 9 short mysteries told in the style of Paul Harvey's Rest of the Story.
So great.
They're unapologetically patriotic, and they're stitched together with a trip to D.C., wherein I visit the monuments and memorials that I first saw on a field trip when I was 12 years old. It's called Something to Stand For because the final story in the movie is called Something to Stand For, and I wrote that not long after the Colin Kaepernick thing, not because I was necessarily angry with him, but I was amazed how confused so many people seem to be around the national anthem, which, by the way, is the ultimate protest song.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, how can you flip off the national anthem or associate it with the man?
Yeah,
it was a battle cry.
Yeah,
you know,
written in the midst of a battle
by a lawyer and a doctor, and I mean that story is so.
It is.
It's just most people know the surface of it, but our national anthem is a drinking song called "To Anacreon in Heaven."
Right.
You know, and the fact that it became this thing that we could truly all stand for for our own reasons. That's beautiful. And I guess maybe the better answer to your question is this. In 1998, 70% of this country defined themselves affirmatively as intensely to extremely patriotic. Today, that number is 38%.
Oh.
And under 35, that number is closer to 18%.
Wow.
Now, why? Why is that? Is it because Democrats and Republicans are from Mars and Venus? Is it because there's really that much space between liberals and conservatives? There's certainly space, for sure. But there's a difference between disagreeing with somebody on issues through the lens of a party and being affirmatively anti-American. And when I see the statues pulled down, when I see them vandalized, when I see them defaced, in the movie I talk to park rangers, and every day they get up, their first job is to clean up the statues. Clean up the statuary, clean up the memorials, you know. And look, I didn't write the movie for Democrats or Republicans. I wrote it for people who still see themselves first and foremost as Americans. And I wrote it for Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, and the fact that they fought like animals during the day over policy, and then they went out and they had a steak because they both loved the country. And they came at it from different ways. But if we can't remind ourselves that there are still a number of things that are universally binding, then we'll never be able to enjoy a shared sense of gratitude, and that will lead to a great unraveling.
Yeah, I'm so happy about it. I can't wait to see it. Tell people where they can get it, digest it, what you want them to do with it, to share. I mean, make the appeal here.
All right.
Where do we see it?
Well, at the risk of, since I've been invited,
you have.
The Shameless Plug goes like this. It's only going to be in theaters for a week. Okay. I wrote it for the 4th of July. So
great.
June 27th through the 4th, you can go to somethingtostandfor.movie. Watch the trailer, behind-the-scenes stuff. There's some really great moments. And reserve some tickets. It's great for the whole family. It's thoughtful. It's surprising. There's a lot of mystery in it. My favorite moment, though, and this is true of, I think, virtually everything I've ever done. It was never part of the plan. It was never in the script. But I was at the World War II Memorial setting up for a stand-up. The director and the lighting guys and the key grips and the gaffers. And we're making a movie. And I look over here and I see half a dozen guys in wheelchairs being pushed in. It was an honor flight.
Oh, wow.
And there's this guy, a very old man, looking at me in this wheelchair. And, you know, somebody's about to say action. And I say to the director, hang on a minute, man. Follow me. Bring the camera. They're like, what are you doing, man? We're making a movie. I'm like, yeah, I know. I just want to. I kneel down and I talk to this guy. Andy Michael was his name. 91, Korean War vet. We had a 15-minute conversation. And in that unscripted moment with this actual guy, I got to the heart of the movie better than I could have with any of the stuff that I did on purpose. And so he's in the movie.
Love it.
We use a chunk of the conversation, Ken, because when you look into the face of a 91-year-old man and tears are running down it, and he's there in front of that wall of stars with his family and his friends at a place. He knew that memorial was there, but he'd never been there. And to see that happen, and now all of a sudden my whole crew's around him.
Yeah.
And now we're making a hubbub, right?
Yeah.
Now hundreds of people have come over to watch. And suddenly there we are. You know, I'm talking to an old man who risked his life for me. And the cameras are pointed at him. And the people are looking at him.
Yeah.
And anybody who can't look at that moment and not agree that it's worth standing for,
I agree.
I don't know what they're doing here.
Well, I would challenge our audience to this. If you believe in the ideals of this country and what it provides you, warts, sins, and all, vote by going to see this movie. This is something worth voting for. And I think when you buy a ticket to something like this, you're voting for the ideals and for what we get out of this country. And people pay attention to numbers. And so that's why we're promoting this across the board at Ramsey Solutions. This is still the greatest nation in the world. It still provides the greatest opportunity in the world to actually do what the Stoics and John Locke influenced Thomas Jefferson to pen, to pursue life, to pursue happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. 3 notions that go way beyond America, but I still think we represent it the best. And this movie helps share so much of that. Again, something to stand for. It's going to lead into July 4th week. Go see it, buy tickets, take groups, spread the word on social media, because we need stories like this told. Mike, thanks again for hanging out with us. If you enjoyed that conversation, let us know by liking, sharing, and don't forget to subscribe. We'll be back before you know it.